One of the reasons why it's so hard for unheard entrepreneurs to fix their content and their messaging is because they don't even realize they're doing anything wrong. So the big question is how do you fix it if you don't know you're doing the wrong things? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about with Video Forex student, Kat Elizabeth. So if you want to hear this story, well, keep listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today's going to be a little bit of a unique podcast because you're going to get to experience a little bit of coaching live. You're going to get to hear a success story, and you're going to get the inside scoop of what it's like to be a member of the Video Forex program. So today we have a Video Forex student here on the podcast, Kat Elizabeth from the Personal Branding Project. Kat, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. And we were chatting a little bit before the episode here and just kind of hearing a little bit about your journey. And I think you're like the perfect person to have on the podcast because it sounds like, you know, we have our unheard entrepreneur identity and avatar that we like to kind of describe. And it sounds like you were that person, like you were doing a lot of the things that the industry has told us to do, and you're not really seeing the momentum. So what was it like for you? Like, where were you before you entered the world of Video Forex and our like sphere? I mean, what were you doing? What were you trying to do to gain momentum and put out content?
Yeah, so I was definitely big on the visibility part of my strategy. So my big thing was always YouTube. Like, thanks to Gary Vaynerchuk, I was like, yep, I've got to build a brand on YouTube. So I'm just going to create heaps and heaps of content. and I didn't have a business when I first started doing that. So it was kind of okay. Like I guess the visibility piece was like attracting an audience. I was becoming known as an expert in the things that I was talking about, but it didn't need to go anywhere.
Right.
So I wasn't really aware that I'd created a bit of a problem for myself. So then when I did officially launch the personal branding project and realized, oh, hold on, like these videos need to actually do something for my brand and my business and my bottom line, there is this massive disconnect because I knew I could get people to find my videos. And I knew I was known as an expert, but then there's this like growing feeling of like, oh my gosh, like you're a bit of a fraud because like you've got this audience and everyone thinks you're an expert, but you're not. It's not really connecting to your profit. Like I felt like I was still just landing clients the way that I always had, which was like, you know, referrals and networking and like having those one-on-one conversations. And it just did not feel like my content was actually building the business. So it was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you were almost, I call it like the one-on-one type of thing where it's like you get a client here, you get a client here, but nothing's consistent. And you might get a few, then you might not get any. But if I'm understanding correctly, what it sounds like is they weren't really coming from your content, and content's supposed to be content marketing, right? Like it's supposed to be marketing, it's supposed to be advertising, it's supposed to be bringing in clients. And it doesn't sound like that was really the case for you. Is that accurate?
Oh, for sure. Like I was growing my email list. And then when I was doing these launches, because I mean, for some extra context, I had one-on-one offerings, but I was also trying to start really growing the course side of my business. And that's where I noticed that the content was failing me because I needed to increase the quality of leads and the quantity of leads coming in. Yeah. But when I did these launches, I would look at the people signing up and be like, oh, damn, like all of these people that have been on my email list that I thought were good leads, like they're not. They're just sitting there, they're reading things, but then obviously not, what I'm saying isn't cutting through with them. They did not feel some sort of urgency to change their situation, even if they were drawn to me for a particular reason in the beginning.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, and I forgot to ask, like, can you let the audience know what it is that you do and what you were kind of like teaching with all that content?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my overarching I guess, title is personal branding coach. So I really help people establish themselves as the experts in their space. And that comes down to visibility. It's also about positioning and their own messaging, which is why there was also extra imposter syndrome going like, oh, can I really help them create content that converts?
Right.
And then connecting their brand to their sales strategy. So it was kind of like that overarching piece of like, how do you get found? And how do you make sure that they're turning into clients? And so I had some programs that I was teaching. I started by teaching video because it was the thing that I started on. And then when I started branching out into broader topics, I think that's where it got even more difficult to talk about what I do, because I was like, this is really big stuff.
Yeah.
How do I try and sum up what I'm doing in these little pieces of content, knowing that there's all these elements that come into play? So people were cool to hire me as their copywriter and to do the work for them, but they weren't necessarily yet trusting me to just teach them how to do the things.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I kind of like, if I'm picking up correctly on the story too, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but working with so many people, I know this is a big problem, is like, you hear the advice of Gary Vaynerchuk, and I love Gary. Like, I think he gives great advice, and I think he's a perfect example of someone that does what we talk about, but he also just kind of tells people to push out a ton of content. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that, and I think what you were experiencing, is when we start doing so much like content that's not intentional and not pointed back to the offer in a very intentional way, we start to attract an audience that's very wide and very broad. And like, you're a personal branding coach, but it sounds like you start getting like someone who wants you for copywriting and not necessarily messaging. And then you get someone who might want messaging, but not, and you're not, it doesn't seem like you were attracting people that understood it's not about one or the other, it's about all of them together. And so it sounded like you were just attracting kind of a wide range of people, because that's essentially what your content was doing. Is that fair and accurate?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I felt like I was throwing spaghetti at the wall with the content. Like, I was just talking about just about anything under the sun, but had not made that connection. Like, maybe everything I talk about should directly connect to the framework that I have and what I'm trying to actually teach people. I thought, if I just offer value, they're going to see me as valuable, and then they're going to want more help.
Yeah.
And again, the other piece that I was missing was like, if I just keep handing them information on a silver platter, they think they have the full picture. They think they got what they needed to move forward, but they don't realize all the things that they don't have, and they're actually staying stuck. So I was in this scarcity thing going, give more, because it's more value to them. But I was actually like allowing them to stay stuck and not make the change that they really needed to make.
Yeah, it's a weird paradigm. And I don't think a lot of people understand this. Like, obviously you do, because you went through it. But it's a weird paradigm where like, you want to be valuable, you want to be perceived as valuable and knowledgeable. So you give people the information, but obviously you're not going to be able to give them everything in continuous 5-minute videos over and over and over again. But you trick them into thinking, okay, cool, I got it. I can go do it on my own. And they don't see the other 90 steps that they're going to need. And so it's almost like a disservice. It's this weird paradigm where you just but then you continue doing it because you want to continue adding value, because people don't realize we can add value in other ways than just giving information. So it's just weird like cycle that most unheard entrepreneurs stay stuck in. And it sounds like that's pretty much where you were, right?
Yeah. It's so once I was exposed to video forex, it was kind of like that thread that you start pulling, and you realize you just have to keep pulling it and pulling it. Like, it wasn't just about fixing some content or making these tiny tweaks. It was about really going way deeper and back to the basics of everything I thought I knew about my content and my positioning and my messaging.
Yeah. How can I ask how that was? Because you are a personal branding expert and you help people with messaging and stuff, but to have to go through someone else's how was that for you? I can imagine it wasn't terribly easy, was it?
It messed with my head a little bit. Definitely shook my confidence, but I knew, like, I'd actually been following you for the year leading up to joining. Like, I'd followed the previous launch and was just not ready for it. I was in a very, like my business was a total baby. I was going from just being a copywriter to having this brand. And so I've been watching you long enough to go, okay, this guy's onto something. I've been seeing it long enough in my business that I need to do this. Right. And so I knew it'd be a little bit painful, but I was at that point where it was like, well, I either do this work and see the result, or I just keep struggling.
Yeah.
And creating content on the content treadmill forever. So it was worth just like ripping off the Band-Aid and having to take a little bit of have a piece of humble pie.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, you also are knowledgeable in what you do. But, I think a lot of people think like they go through our video series or they see some videos and they think, okay, I can go do it myself. And they're not seeing all the because you know how it is. Once you're in the program, you start uncovering everything. You kind of go in a million different directions. And then by the end of the program, all those directions come together in like one solid piece of content, plan, messaging, and all that stuff. But also what happens is when you're inside of your own business, it's so hard to really see everything. So I want the listeners to realize like you may be really good at what you do, but sometimes we need that third perspective or a different process in order to put the pieces together. And I need that too, like to create what we've created. It took like working with people like James Wedmore and Caitlin and getting their input. And they're like, James would say, have you ever thought about this? I'm like, oh my God, that sparked a different idea. Like we need that in our life. And I'm glad you finally took the plunge. So once going through the program, what would you say like the major shift for you was? Like what I mean, obviously there's gonna be a lot, we can dive into it, but what was the main thing that really kind of like moved the needle forward?
Ooh, yeah, there were a lot of things. I mean, I guess the first thing that I realized, because you talk a lot about sitting in the silence, and I'm someone who is very impatient, and I definitely spent the 12 months in the lead up to joining the program rushing through everything because I was like, well, I've got all the formulas, I've got all the templates. Plus, like you said, like I'm good at doing this for everybody else. So I should just I should know all these things. So the first temptation was to just like speed through. And then when I got to the part of like scripting videos and really trying to figure out what videos I was supposed to create, I was like, oh, you have to go back to the beginning again. Like you are not ready for this. You have to figure out like really get inside the head of your client in a way that you never have before and really understand what is keeping them stuck and what is keeping them from even knowing that they need your help. And just throwing more how-tos at them is just not the solution. So there was just like, it sounds so strange. It was a little bit of like a spiritual awakening in that I started approaching my business differently. Like every single time I was on a call with a client, I was learning from what they were telling me and reading between the lines and starting to go, oh, like this is the real reason they come to me. And I've been speaking to the kind of surface level stuff that I thought that they were looking for, but there is a deeper reason that they're stuck. And so that allowed me to then realize that I need to repackage my framework. I need to stop approaching it from the things that I thought that they wanted, and add in the layers of the stuff that I know is going to really provide the transformation. And then that led me to changing my programs. It led me to changing my website copy. Like it was literally like months of just this frustrated, like having to feel a little bit stuck and slowing down. Yep. But then what happened afterwards was it started to speed up again. And I started to see, oh, okay, like it's worth doing this work, even if it slows you down for a while.
And I almost don't like telling people this because it's one of those things. I was talking to my wife about like starting a business. And I'm like, man, if I just knew what I had to go through to get to where I am today. And like, if you would have told me it's going to take 8 years and failures and all of this stuff, moving in with the in-laws, being $40,000, I'm like, I don't know if I would have done it. And I feel like that's the video Forex in some ways, or it's like, if you want to get to that core message, the stuff that really resonates, that really drives in the sales and all that stuff, it's a process. And a lot of people that go through the program, that's the experience they have. They're like, I got to scrap everything, or I have to create a whole new offer. And what happens is they don't want to do that sometimes. And so, because it is a lot of work, but also it happens is the brand that you currently have and the programs you have, it's a part of your identity. So in order to move on to something bigger, better, and more evolved, like you literally have to say goodbye to a part of you in a way. And I almost don't like telling people that, but really that's how you grow, because obviously what you're doing before wasn't working. And I'm sure you're aware of it since you're in my circle, but like, I work with a shaman, and the work with the shaman, he has these things, you go through these things called shamanic deaths, which is really where he'll open your eyes to new perspectives of things that you haven't seen before. And it literally, in order to grow, it literally requires you to leave a version of yourself behind. And I almost feel like that's like what the video Forex can do sometimes. But you're, for example, someone who did it, put in the work, and came out the other side like more clear, more confident, and doing even better. Can I hear your perspective of the silence? Because you said the silence was a big thing for you, and I know it's something I talk about a lot, but like, what does that mean for you, and what was your experience with that?
I mean, I've never been good with silence. Like, I'm not someone who's ever been good at meditating or like tell me to slow down. I'm like, no, if I'm doing things, I'm moving forward.
Right.
But what I realized is in the doing, I was really stuck in this hamster wheel of just doing the same things over and over again. And so like the opposite of silence was consuming more content, signing up for more and more programs, like trying to create the new thing and just like make these really surface level changes. And sitting in silence was me like really sitting back and looking at everything and going, are you really attracting the people that you want to be working with right now? Do you truly understand what they have going on in their lives right now? You know, are you really are you confident that what you're building is the thing that you want to be building in like 12 months from now and 5 years from now? And then giving myself space to have days where I wouldn't create anything, I wouldn't do anything, and I'd just have conversations. Like I just started having more calls with people and paying more attention to what was going on, being present. And it's not like there was like, everyone wants a formula for something or a roadmap. Like this is the stuff where there isn't a formula. It's you have to start trusting your instincts and trusting that there is an inner wisdom in there, that you have learned a lot in the time that you've been a business owner. But in doing, you're not actually moving forward. So
Right.
it was again, it was a bit of a, like it messed with my head a little bit because it was so counterintuitive, but it so quickly started to, I guess, like the results started to come very quickly. Some of them in a very like tangible way, whereas some of it was just this clarity and this confidence and this ability to like know that things were moving, even if I couldn't see them happening right now.
Yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. It is counterintuitive to the way we've been taught to do things and to, I guess, create a business, grow a business. But really, what you're experiencing with the silence, at least what it means to me, is it really is like remembering who you are. It's not letting someone else dictate what you're going to say, what you're going to offer, and just remembering who you are at the core. Like you said, it allows you to be present. So your thoughts aren't in the past. Your thoughts aren't like, well, I did this and it didn't work, or someone told me this at one point, so now I got to listen to it. It shuts off the past, and it shuts off the future. In the future, the voices of the future usually look like, I don't know if that's going to work. That's not really realistic. That's not. And those are all the thinking mind. You know, the thinking mind is letting the past dictate our decisions, and then the future is all about like fear and risk. But being present, being the silence, allows us to get rid of all that, remember who we are. And that's the profound stuff. And it takes work to do that because our mind has been trained our entire life to just be like da 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 da. And that's why like part of the program is like sitting in silence. And it's so funny, people that go through the program or take a really long time to get results, they're the ones that aren't sitting in silence. And I'm just like, guys, like you have to do the work, like you have to do it. And I'm promising you, it will come, it will hit. And it sounds like it did for you. So like, what kind of results were you able to see once you started putting some of the pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing I noticed was I'd gone from attracting a whole bunch, like when I did have people signing up for my programs, they were just like all sorts of different kinds of people. And I was like, what is the common thread? I don't fully know. Obviously, they resonated with something I said, but it was really difficult to see this like common denominator. Whereas when I relaunched my program, it was only a soft launch. So this isn't something I get to like brag about all the big numbers, but the real shift was like I had this decent, a small but decent number of people join, and every single one of them was my dream client. I was like, oh, I'm glad it was you, because I even had this invitation for my old clients who'd been part of my previous membership to move forward with me. And I was very clear of like, okay, I'm changing direction. You can either do this or you can do this.
Right.
And part of me was like willing some of them to say yes and willing some of them to just decide that it was time, because I knew I wasn't their person anymore. I finally had that clarity on who I was able to serve at my highest. But then the other big thing is I redid my website, reworked my framework, and suddenly just like had people, for instance, I was popping up on Google all the time, but I wasn't necessarily getting leads from Google. And then suddenly I had these applications coming through for my one-on-one coaching, which is a high ticket offer. And I'd never heard of these people before. They just found me on Google. Apparently they'd done a ton of research looking at all these different people, and they just knew from the beginning that I was the person that they wanted to work with. And we got on a call, and then I started having this like 100% conversion rate with all of my one-on-one calls. And part of that is because I'd already attracted the right person to begin with. Like they'd pre-qualified me, but also I had this confidence in knowing what person I can help and what person I won't help and the way I help them. So for me, I was able to walk away from the sales calls going, look, this is what I do. This is who I am. And this is who I help. Take it or leave it. Like it was just an invitation. If it feels right, come with me. But there was no selling. Like some people I even tried to like let go because I wasn't sure if they were the right person. And they were so insistent. They're like, no, I am absolutely sure at this point, which was weird. But I rolled with it, just trusting that they know, like they do know based on what I'm putting out there now, because it is really clear. Yeah. And that obviously led to a much bigger financial return as well. Like that's the cherry on top, I guess, of the whole thing.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things there I want to kind of break apart, because I think, especially with the program being called Video Forex Effect, everyone thinks that it has everything to do with video, and it doesn't. It has everything to do with messaging. In fact, we're considering changing the name of the program, because it did start off with video, but we quickly realized it was really more about messaging. And it doesn't sound like you're even putting videos out. You started with just like changing the messaging on the website. And I want everyone to realize that the program is really about messaging and creating what I call a messaging ecosystem. When someone sees your website or your emails or your copy or your ads or your podcasts or your podcast interviews or whatever, it's all the same. It's the consistency of the identity, of the beliefs, the unique solution, what it is that you do. And when people were hitting your website and knowing that they were the right fit, that wasn't by mistake. That was because we are very intentional with the identities we're using, how you are specifically helping them. What are the specific problems that they're facing? And when that happens, you get to experience things like you just did, which was they're like fighting to work with you. You're like, I don't know if they're the right fit. And they're like, no, let me give you money. I promise you, like I'm a right fit. So once you started getting more like one-on-one clients from your website, where did it go from there?
I mean, during that process, and I really did that so that I could take the pressure off and buy myself a bit of time to repackage the program that I wanted to offer, because again, that was something that I'd rushed to put together, and I'd put everything in there because just like with my free content, I thought my paid content should just include everything that I know. And it was that getting connected with that person and where they are today helped me go, to get them where they want to be right now, I only need to give them this part of my knowledge and then let them go through the transformation, and then there can be an invitation for what comes next. So so I was able to lock in all of these one-on-one clients and just go, cool, like I'm covered, like things are going well. This time I get to do my program the right way. And so I've even created the program in a different way, where I used to just like smash out like a couple of days and I'd have the whole thing, published, put together, and I'd be exhausted. But I'm like, that's cool. I'm just going to get it out there. And instead I've been creating a module every 2 weeks and just really taking my time with it. And in every 2-week period, I'm having even more light bulb moments about the clients that I'm working with. And it gives me this chance to put in things or take things out that I realize aren't going to serve the clients. So my one-on-one clients, I guess, are helping me dictate this bigger picture program that I'm offering, and the feedback from the people who are taking it already, like from the first lesson, are already going, whoa, this, like even just this one lesson is changing everything. I didn't used to get that feedback. People were always impressed by how much I put in and how well it was presented, and they were all staying there because they're like, we know there's so much gold in your programs, so I'm just staying around for it. Right. But they weren't actually experiencing the transformation when they first started working with me. So that's huge, and that's what makes me know that my program that I'm creating right now is going to be my $1 million asset. But I just had to go back to basics with that as well, and re-look at basically everything that was going into it.
Yeah, and there's so many golden nuggets that I think the listeners might have just kind of like listened to and didn't really grasp. But even when you were creating the program, and that's what I call the silence, instead of like speeding through and letting the busyness kind of like breed your creation, you're even letting the silence dictate how the program is structured. And when you do that, you said you kept having light bulb moments, and that's that's what the silence does. The silence allows you to move your awareness to different levels so you see things in different lights. And that's why the Video 4X, and that's how we created the Video 4X. That's how we created all the frameworks and all that stuff. People go like, how did you think of it? I'm like, I didn't. I just slowed the mind and it all just started connecting in my head. And I just took the time to be silent and present. And we had a very similar experience where as soon as I created, same as you, I'm like, this is the $1 million asset. This is it. And you get to experience that too. And a lot of the students who take the time to put in the work all experience that as well. And so, you said you had your best month shortly after that. Is that correct? Or is there something in between that point and your best month ever?
I mean, I think I joined the program and it was like September. And then I spent like the next 2 months reworking the messaging and just kind of chilling and knowing that, all right, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, just hang in there. Yeah. And I did another version of sitting in the silence where like in December, I decided to actually take my first like 3-week break. Since I've been in self-employed 5.5 years ago, I don't give myself holidays. And so even that was like connected to me realizing, oh, look at what can happen when you slow down. So I gave myself these 3 weeks off, and in that period just started landing all these clients. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is proof. It's not just about the doing. It's about being present and being receptive and ready to have those conversations with the right people. And yeah, so I mean, I told you before the show, like I don't normally talk numbers. It's never been my thing. Yeah. But it's worth noting that like I went from, my like a good month during last year would, be around the 10K mark, and I was really proud of myself because the year before I was like, let's not even talk about the year before that I had. Like I tripled my revenue in 2020. But yeah, in December I did a $25,000 month and was just like, what just happened? And because there was no single tangible thing, like it wasn't like I did some activity or implemented some like obvious paint by numbers strategy, but it was just this like obviously this snowball effect of what had begun a few months earlier starting to pick up speed. And so it means that like I'm really excited about what's coming this year because I'm now starting to see what's possible.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I tell people all the time, like the Video 4X and our process and our method, it's not a strategy. And it's not reliant on a specific platform. It's the thing that fuels a strategy. It's the thing that makes a platform work for you. It's the thing. I mean, it really is the foundation of essentially really any business. And we hear all the time people having very similar experiences where they kind of slow down because that is a little bit of a requirement to figure out what the messaging is. And we've been told so much that like you got to hustle and work hard in order for money to come in. But what I find is when we slow down, yes, the messaging comes in, but it also puts you in a much higher vibration or frequency type of energy as well. So like you start to become the business owner that you need to be in order to see those results. Kind of like what Jim Fortin talks about, the be do have model. It's like certain results produce certain reaction or certain actions produce certain results. And you start taking bigger actions and better actions and more aligned actions, you start getting bigger, better, and more aligned results. And so that's why I tell people, I'm like, do you think you're gonna be a better business owner when you're like hustling, working your face off, you can't really get thoughts and you're just constantly just doing, putting things out there? Or do you think you're gonna be a more powerful business owner when you take the time, you feel confident and aligned with that message, you take the time to be very intentional, so you're hitting people on those deeper levels? And the answer is always like, obviously we're gonna be better when we're slowing down, and you got to experience that. So, where are you at now with all of your messaging and stuff? Let's transition a little bit into where you're at now, so we can help get you to that an even higher level.
Yeah. So I feel like when I'm having the one-on-one conversations and people get the chance to experience like my whole website, that they get there, like they know what I'm about. Which is awesome. And I feel like my framework now really encompasses the transformation that my person needs to go through. Where I still question myself and come a little bit unstuck is that I have realized that the thing that I'm helping with, like there's the thing under the thing. So people know that they're like, I need to build a brand. Like I need followers. I need a marketing strategy. I need to, like, I want to have a brand like yours. Like they come to me saying, oh, like I want a brand that looks like yours. And I'm like, cool. But is it really my brand on the surface that you are drawn to, or is it something beyond that? And so usually it turns out that the thing that they're really struggling with is self-worth, and it's like the imposter syndrome and the perfectionism and not even feeling like, who am I to even show up and do these things?
Right.
So it's, yes, the brand strategy is important, but they could have a strategy. They may have a strategy. They may have done all the programs, and yet they're not implementing what they're doing because they don't believe in themselves. And I've realized that my thing, people come to me because I'm very real. I'm their personal cheerleader. Like they always say, like when they're listening to my podcast, it's like, I've got like this friend in my ear just like telling me to keep going. And I'm like, yeah, like my real worth, my value comes from helping people be seen and helping them to see their own value, then using it to communicate what they do with the world. But I'm like, how do I sum that up in just like a tiny little thing?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So be seen. So you were really helping them be seen, even to be seen by themselves for who they really are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm just taking some notes. And then for the listeners, just so you are aware, we are moving into like the coaching session of the episode, just so you can kind of get a little glimpse of the elements and how we bring things together. So, okay, so I got that. A couple questions for you. Number one, what is the struggling avatar identity?
So I call them the stuck service provider. And I realized that the stuck has multiple kind of meanings to it because they're very stuck in their own thoughts. They're stuck in that they're not growing. They just feel very stagnant.
Okay, cool. And then future-based hero?
The InDemand brand.
Ooh, love that. Cool. So you have the InDemand brand. And then, so for the listeners there, if you're not familiar with the struggling avatar future-based hero, essentially what we do inside of a messaging ecosystem is we like to create two different identities so that your audience will resonate with the struggling avatar, but then have a desire or demand for that future-based hero. Now, the second piece of this is we come up with a unique solution. And usually if we can do our messaging the right way, when people self-recognize or identify as the struggling avatar, they realize they want to be the future-paced hero. Our unique solution is how they bridge that gap. So, Kat, what is your unique solution?
So it's the InDemand brand blueprint.
Love it. Cool. I always love when the future-paced hero lines up with the unique solution. So it's just so cool. Okay, so InDemand brand blueprint. Okay, and then what are the pillars?
So it's get clear, get seen, get heard, get paid, repeat.
Okay, so one more time, get seen.
Get clear is the
clear.
first one. So the clarity around who they want to reach and who they want to be, who they're speaking to, all of those things.
Yep.
Get seen is like the visibility piece of the strategy. Get heard is the messaging and the thought leadership piece. Get paid is how that connects to your sales strategy, but also your client experience.
Yep.
And then repeat is like really learning from, like, it's consistency, but it's also reading the data, reading the results and making tweaks and constantly revisiting, going back to square one, which I learned from Video 4X, and making sure that all of the strategy is connected to the right goals still, that it hasn't changed.
Cool. Okay, got it. Okay, so I've done this enough to just already know where we're going and where we need to make the changes. But a couple other questions, because I see where we need to go, but I don't see the full picture quite yet. So my next question to you is, okay, so we know that you're helping people with the mindset, and we know that you have to help them with the self-worth, because without that, they can't execute on that framework. They can't execute on the clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat. What else are you doing for them? Is there anything else you're doing for them? So we have like the strategy, we have the mindset and different things like that. Do you find that those two things usually together is all they need? Is there like a third element that you know they need or think they need, or is there something that, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, each one of the pillars is, I approach it from the two layers. So kind of like identifying where they have the limiting beliefs and removing them before then moving to the strategy piece. But I mean, I guess for people in programs, and the reason they work with me often is also for the feedback and for the validation of their ideas as well, is what can help. But I guess I didn't kind of connect those things because I'm like, but I also want them to be able to like use the framework on their own and not rely on me being that person.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about,
does that answer the question?
Yeah. And what about community? Is there any community involved in what you do? And does that help them in any way?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. So like they do when they're part of this program, if we're talking about the program specifically, because I use the framework for like one-on-one as well, but they come into a community and there's deep dive, like monthly calls and hot seats and things like that. And then they also get like all of the like extras of like templates and checklists and things to just help them like stay on track.
Okay, cool. And then let's say I was a struggling avatar. So let's pretend I was the stuck service provider. And let's pretend there was no frameworks. Let's pretend you didn't have anything. And I just came to you and I'm like, Kat, I need you to help me. I have this service. No one's buying it. What's the first thing that you're going to do, tell me, or look at?
I guess I'm first going to try and understand what it is that you are even selling and what you're trying to like help other people with. And I'm going to look at what you've already been doing till now to see if there is actually something missing or what you're doing is heading in the wrong direction.
Okay. And do you find that a lot of people are doing that? Like doing something incorrectly, or there's a misalignment in there?
Often, usually it's that they probably have got some sort of strategy, but they're not confident in the strategy or in themselves. So they're not even implementing it consistently enough to see if it works.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I think I got the answer. I'm going to throw something at you and let's just see what comes up. So I think from a messaging standpoint, I don't want to change the struggling avatar. I don't want to change the future pizza or the name of the unique solution because those are amazing and they sound great. Where I think the problem is, and I think you realize where the problem is that you're doing more than what's included in the current unique solution. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So when I look at the get clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat, I actually see that as one pillar, not the solution. And so this is like you're unfortunately you might be experiencing another like shedding of everything you've been doing to move forward again, but that's okay.
I'm here. It's all good.
Okay, cool. You just like click off. Wait, where'd you go? Okay. So the next question is, well, what are the other pillars? And we talk about unique solutions in the program. Sometimes we need to go higher level with certain things. So like, for example, and I know you understand this, so I'm just going to explain it so the audience can understand. Like the video 4X will have impact and revenue goals, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is impactful messaging. Pillar number 3, synergistic strategy. Pillar number 4 is workflows, so that it's hands off for like the production of content is hands off for the entrepreneur. Now, that very much is kind of like a framework. Like, here's the framework, and that's what I would call a framework unique solution. But a higher level unique solution for the video 4X would be something like we need silence, alignment, and strategy or something like that. Like higher level elements that come together, and then we can dive into each one of those elements and go like, okay, here's how you execute on this element, this one, and this one. So for you, I actually think the clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat is one pillar, and it's more of like a strategy or execution based pillar. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And then I think there is another pillar, which is like a mindset pillar. I wouldn't call it mindset because that's such a buzzword and doesn't. And to be honest with you, I don't think that accurately describes what it is you're actually helping people with. But just for the sake of this conversation, we'll call it mindset. Yeah, sure. You can come up with something later. But I actually think step number 1 or pillar number 1 is something around like deconstructing or alignment. And what I mean by this is you look at what they currently have and see and deconstruct what like structurally is the real problem. Once you figure out what that real problem is, then you're like, okay, that's what we're going to fix. But before we do that, we need to make sure that your mindset or your self-worth and imposter syndrome are in order, because you're going to have to be a different person in order to execute on this new thing we're going to create together. And then once we deconstruct what the problem really is, any misalignments, you become that like confident, worthy person. Now we can execute on the clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat, which is like the strategy and execution of creating an in-demand brand. And you just tell them, like, if any one of these pillars are missing, like you don't have the mindset, you don't have the worthiness, you're never going to have an in-demand brand. If you don't like deconstruct or really look at the problems that are existing right now, you'll never have an in-demand brand. Like I can give you the strategy all day long, but those are the invisible elements that execute on everything. And then once those are in order, now we can move on to clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat, execution strategy. Does that resonate, make sense to you?
Totally. It's so funny because the very first lesson is that pillar that you're talking about. Like, I'm like, what's
funny.
keeping you stuck? But I'm trying to jam it in, like all of these pieces that I guess that like the mindset or the worthiness, whatever we're calling it, is always jammed in as the first lesson of the pillar. And it's always felt like it's not giving them enough weight, because I've realized in my own career that it has way more weight than my brand strategy. When I'm like standing in my worth, I will show up and it doesn't matter what I say, what I do, I get different results.
Yeah.
Whereas I can write the perfect post, and if I don't actually believe in the things that I'm saying or believe in myself, then it's just going to get crickets. So it's a very freeing thought to go, oh, I get to spend all this time on the stuff I'm obsessed with and give them the chance to experience it properly before getting to the strategy.
And that's what messaging and content should be. It should be you talking about the things that you want to talk about. And usually what happens is we shove those to the side because we think we have to talk about strategy or these other things. And that is a version of forgetting who you are and what you want to talk about. And it does move you a little bit out of alignment because you're like, here's what I really want to talk about, but I'm not going to because I'm supposed to be talking about these things. And now, like, bring it to the forefront. That is what you're known for. And, we've had a similar experience with that in my brand where when we first started the Video Forex, we never talked about the silence, although that's what I did. Because I was in that same boat. I was like, no one wants to hear about this. This is effing crazy. This is like woo-woo, esoteric, like no one. And then that is the thing that has brought the most results for our students. It's not, yes, the strategy and the exercises and all that stuff, but it really is. And you're a perfect example of the silence. Okay. So do you have any questions on that so far? On that messaging?
No, it honestly, it resonates. Like it makes so much sense. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this feels good.
It's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the only thing that we would have to go through, and we probably won't be able to do it on the podcast, this is probably something for you to sit in silence, is like what those names are going to be. Although if you want to do that, come up with it and post it in the Facebook group. I'd be more than happy to review it for you. But the next question that I do have for you is around the deeper purpose. And do you have a deeper purpose associated with all this right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably don't put it into very good words right now because it's been evolving as I go, but it really is giving people, like helping them see their own potential so that they can go out and achieve their bigger purpose and make a bigger change.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit on this one.
Yeah.
And I love that you said it's evolving. And again, that's one of the things we talk about all the time is that people think they have to get it 100% right. And it's never going to be 100% right because it's always going to be evolving and changing. And the more things you put into action, the more clear you start to become. So I love that. I love that you're actually putting it out there. But what I'm going to say is helping people like uncover their purpose is more of like the result that you bring than it is a deeper purpose. And what I want you to look at is when 10,000 people find their purpose, what effect is created in the world. So one way to do that is just add the words "so that" at the end of that sentence. So let's pretend you just said your deeper purpose again and you said help people find their purpose. My question to you would be, so what? So that they can what? Like what happens? I know, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
And it's fine if you don't have an answer either.
Yeah.
Because it can come in time.
Yeah, no, it feels like there's so many little things and I'm like, what's the big thing? I mean, I guess it's so everyone can be out there actually living the life that they dreamed that they were going to be able to live.
Yep.
Which I do think is, as a whole, like the whole world is going to be, and I always like cringe because I'm like, it sounds so cheesy, but I know the world is going to be a better place if people actually just do the thing that they know they're supposed to be doing.
Yep. Okay. Another question for you. How specifically is the world going to be a better place when that happens?
It's going to be more connected. It's going to be more joyful and creative. It's going to feel more meaningful.
So I'm just writing this down. So give me 1 second. Now, there's a lot of power in the question that I just asked you, because the answer that you gave, you said the world will be a better place. And you said, and you almost like you said something along the lines of like, it's cringe, like it makes me want to cringe because that's what everyone else says. But that's the biggest problem with messaging and copy, is that everyone says the same things. But then I asked you specifically, how is it going to be a better place? And you gave me a more specific answer that still describes the world being a better place, but in your unique words. And so you said something like joyful, there'll be more meaningful, and connections. Connected in the world.
And even creative.
And creative. And I think there's an opportunity to even explore that a little further, like how specifically are people, and who specifically is now more connected. And who specifically and how do they get to experience that creativity a little bit more? And when we start to get specific on those things, we say specifically so that what, we start to really uncover that deeper purpose. And I mean, even in just in this 2-minute conversation, we went from like, I help people find their purpose to I help people be connected and more creative, which is a much more unique way to rally people behind that mission that you're creating. So what I'll do is I'll leave it there for you to kind of play around with and explore. But just remember, with that deeper purpose, we want to kind of create that message that people are going to rally behind. And so for all you listeners, basically we've created the 2 identities that you want to create within your messaging ecosystem. We kind of went through Kat's unique solution and kind of up-leveled that, like went one level higher, which is how people go from struggling avatar to future-based hero. And then we went through deeper purpose. And what the deeper purpose does is when you create content around the deeper purpose, it allows people to connect with you on those deeper levels, like rally behind your message. Again, it has nothing to do with what you're selling, but has everything to do like why you're doing what you're doing. So does that make sense? And you're following all that as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Do you have any questions on any of that?
No, it's good. It made me realize that I let myself off the hook with the deeper purpose. I think that was the sitting in silence, and I was like, you know what? I can deal with that later. Yeah. Because it felt like the easy part. I think because the connection piece and the vulnerable storytelling and has always come kind of easy to me. So I've been able to like rest on my laurels, and I always felt like, oh no, this other thing is the thing I need to focus on. But I can now see that it plays a really huge role in attracting the right kind of people and getting them just as invested in what I'm doing as I am as well.
110%. Okay. So on the coaching front, how do you feel now? Is there anything else you want to cover as far as it comes to your messaging and next steps?
Honestly, I don't think so, because it sounds so funny. Like we said, like you have to have someone else on the outside that just sometimes can see the thing that you're missing. And I'm just seeing all this potential of like, okay, like I can have my program that teaches the strategy piece. It's not like I have to necessarily like completely redo my program, but I now see where I'm going with all of this. And like the group program is already now being formed of like, oh, this is the thing that I need to be doing, not throwing in a million other strategy pieces like I used to, but actually focusing, making sure that the piece of the transformation that I know holds so much weight has the ability to do that. And then being able to obviously reframe the framework a little bit is going to make it just easier for me to explain what I do. Because when I'm trying to explain it, like get clear is where you not only understand this, but you also do this and this. It's like, it's a lot of pressure on that poor little pillar. So
yeah, it is. I love how you describe that, the poor little pillar. It's taking all this heat. And because as you know, like a lot of the content you're going to create will stem directly from those pillars. Like this totally now opens up the world to talk about freely as much of the worthiness and the mindset type stuff, as well as the deconstruction as you want. So you can equally talk about all of that stuff, like the clear, seen, heard, paid, repeat strategy, as much as mindset and everything else that you want. So I feel like once you start doing it, you can be like, why didn't I do this earlier? Like,
I feel I'm already face palming, especially since I know that it's actually that piece that makes me quite different from most other people who do something similar to what I do. Yeah. They're often focused on the strategy, and I know that my thing is that extra thing, but I've been really downplaying it in my messaging. So
yeah, 110%. Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on here. If there's anyone who's thinking about getting into the video Forex, do you have any advice for them?
I think if you have that niggling feeling that something is off right now, like you're just not connecting and you're putting in a whole lot of effort and not getting the results, chances are it's because your messaging is off. And if you just decide that you want to commit to working on the messaging, know that it's not easy, but if you're going to learn from someone, you should be learning from Brandon, because honestly, like, this is not your average program, as you can probably tell from this conversation. Like, we didn't even talk about video, because literally all the transformation I've experienced so far hasn't even yet included video. Like, that's the next piece, and yet my whole business is turning around. So just do it.
Yeah, that's the power. That's the power of messaging. And if anyone does want to follow you online, they want to check out your stuff, where can they go to find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm at I am Kat Elizabeth on all of the socials, or just personalbrandingproject.co, and you'll find links there to everything.
Awesome. Kat, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and appreciate you putting your trust in us, and the Video Forex means the world.
Thanks for your help.
Amazing. So if you are listening and you want more information, you guys can click the links around this video. You can also go to the Content Revolution Facebook group, where we'll have links to the program, to the video series, and all of that good stuff. And if you love this episode and the podcast, head over to iTunes, leave us a review. We're always so grateful for those, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.